Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the Extra Mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mummy, owner of the Celebration Bar Review.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 215 of the Extra Mile podcast. This is your host, Jackson Mummy. I'm glad to have you with us. Welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time with us, we're really glad to have you here. We come to you every week about this same time to talk about all things bar exam related. And we are just now beginning to get the first leading edge of bar exam results from July 2018. Just a few days away. By the time this episode releases, we'll be just ahead of the first big state to release results, and that'll be Florida on Monday, the 17th of September. So big date, one that we're going to be watching very closely here. As I said, if this is your first time with us, we're really glad to have you here. Longtime listeners already know this, but you can get your podcast information from us in several different ways. If you'd like to watch our videos, you can go to celebrationbarreview.com/215. That's the episode number to watch today's episode. If you'd prefer to listen to your podcast, you can do that on Apple iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, lots of different places where podcasts are syndicated. And be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of the information that we've got coming up in weeks to come. In addition to all of that, we do have all of our previous episodes of the podcast, going back several years, on our website. So if you go to celebrationbarreview.com, you'll see a button at the top of the page for podcasts. Click there. You'll go into our archives where you'll find all the podcasts and all the show notes. So I encourage you to rummage around in there. It's sort of like going up into the attic. There's some interesting stuff and interesting things to see and hear. So I'm glad to have you no matter what the circumstance. Now, as I said, we're just around the corner from the first set of big results coming, but we've had a few states release results in the first week of September. And these are typically smaller jurisdictions like North Dakota, Nebraska, a little bit larger jurisdictions like Indiana and North Carolina, but not enough typically to give us a big sense of what's going on. I will say that based on what little results we're seeing, particularly with respect to the multi-state, it's not favorable. The early results show a slight decrease from July 2018 results as compared to July 2017 results in Indiana and North Carolina. Now, that's early information, and it's certainly subject to change and more evaluation as we go along. But what it tells me is that if I'm reading the tea leaves, we're going to see a continuation of the trend that we had over the last couple of years, and that is that overall pass rates are going to continue to decline. Now, don't be misled if you're watching this information and these numbers. All of these numbers will be much better than what you heard about for February 2018. That doesn't mean bar takers are doing better or that the exam is easier or anything of the sort. What it really means is that in the July exams across the country, you have an influx of brand new first-time takers, typically from higher quality law schools, to be candid, and those bar takers move the needle forward. They move it up. Now, to be sure, we don't see jurisdictions that have 30% pass rates in February go to 80% pass rates in July. It's not anything near that dramatic. But you will see generally a higher uptick in numbers, typically about 10 to 15% in most jurisdictions between February and July. So just bear that in mind as you start to hear some of these numbers coming out. What we do see right now is that this slight downturn, a couple percentage points, is a continuation of what I've been watching now for the last 3 or 4 years, and that is that we're seeing the July results continually erode, even against prior July exams. So we'll see if that's true when we get to the bigger jurisdictions over the next few weeks, and we'll keep you informed on that. Now, if you are taking the bar exam in 2019, either because it's your first time or perhaps you're one of the folks that did not succeed in 2018, we've got good news for you. You can pass the bar exam, and you can do it by doing something different, which also happens to be the name of our new live webinar. It's called Do Something Different, Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. We're going to be offering this webinar on Thursday night, September 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's 4 o'clock Pacific. I really hope you'll join me for it. We're going to go through the 4 steps that you have to follow to be successful on the bar exam. And along the way, I'm going to be sharing the case studies of successful students who found a way to do something different and to succeed on their bar exams. And I hope that you'll check it out. We'll also finish that webinar up with a live Q&A. That's always a lot of interesting questions that I get from folks, and I'm glad to answer those. Now, this webinar is completely free, but you do need to register in advance, and you can do that in one of a couple of different ways. You can check out the show notes here on the audio or video version and claim your seat there. Or you can go to celebrationbarreview.com, and right at the top of our homepage, you'll see the opportunity to sign up. Or you can go to celebrationbarreview.com/webinar. So you can see we've got lots of different ways for you to get into the webinar. Now, if Thursday at 7 p.m. doesn't work for you, we also have the same content available in a special on-demand version of the webinar. This means that you can watch it anytime at your convenience. You just click that button for the on-demand version. You'll be taken right into the webinar. You'll have all of the same information available. The only difference, of course, is that I'm not there to do a live Q&A, but you can send your questions to me through the webinar via email, and I'll respond promptly. So whatever works best for you, we really want you to check out this webinar. It's a great opportunity to see the steps you have to take in order to do something different. And the theory behind this webinar, and the theory really behind our course, is that doing the same thing over and over again simply isn't going to get you a different result. And we all know that, but we don't always behave that way. And so this webinar is going to show you specifically what you have to do differently if you want to make the next bar exam your last bar exam. All right. Well, in today's episode, I forgot to tell you what it was about, but maybe you already saw. Today's episode is titled, While You Wait for the Bar Results. And this is a message I first recorded many, many years ago and then updated recently to talk about 5 things that I think bar takers can do while they're waiting for their bar exam results. You know, whether you're waiting just a few days now or you've got months ahead of you, if you're a California or a Georgia bar taker or some of the UBE jurisdictions like New York, you've still got some time before your results are going to come out. And it's a very difficult time emotionally. It's a difficult time relationally. And it's just hard to sort of figure out where you are. It's like you're in limbo and you want to get your life started. We recognize that. So in today's message, I'm going to talk about some things you can do, some practical things, while you're waiting for bar results. I think you'll find it really helpful. And if you're not yet at the point where you're taking the bar exam, well, stick around. I think it's kind of useful to know what that process will be like after you're done with your exam, because it's going to happen to you regardless. Everyone has to wait. No one gets to find out immediately about their bar results. So I think it's a message that's certainly timely for our July 2018 audience, but also useful for those of you taking the exam coming up in 2019. So let's go ahead and jump into today's message while you wait for results and see some things that you can do to make the time go a little better while you're waiting. Well, today I'm going to be talking about a subject that's going to be on the thoughts of a lot of people right now, and that is, what do you do while you're waiting to get your bar exam results? It's a big topic, and frankly, it's a big concern for a lot of people because it's such a long period of time that some of you have to wait. I'm going to offer 5 things you can do, very specific things, while you wait for your bar exam results. And for those of you who have not yet taken your bar exam, you might say, well, this is probably not very important for me. And the truth is, it's obviously more focused on those folks who've taken their exam and now are waiting. But I think it's always useful to look ahead and see what's going to be going on and what you might want to be doing or thinking about or preparing for when you get to that point where you're waiting for your results. Now, for those of you that are not terribly familiar with the process, what happens is that after the bar exam's finished, there is a fairly lengthy waiting period, but it varies from state to state. Some jurisdictions will have their results out within 5 weeks after the exam. Most jurisdictions typically wait 8 to 10 weeks or 12 weeks, and a few large jurisdictions will wait even longer than that. And what that means is that the July bar exam results, for example, for California bar takers, typically don't come out until almost Thanksgiving, mid to late November. Georgia bar takers are usually in that same kind of time period. And the first group of students that will get their results typically out of the July or the February exam, big jurisdiction, would be Florida and many of the smaller uniform bar exam administrations. And then in the middle, you've got states like Texas and New York, New Jersey, D.C., lots of jurisdictions where lots of people are taking the exam and they're just sitting and waiting. So for some of these jurisdictions, we don't actually have a specific release date, and you're literally just on pins and needles waiting for the email to show up in your inbox. So without overstating it, I think for a lot of people, this is a somewhat frightening time and a really time when you're thinking, what should I be doing? What should be going on during this time? How do you handle the stress, the emotion, and all of the feelings that go with this sudden buildup of energy to take the test? And then, poof, the air is all out of the balloon and you're just in that mode of, well, what do I do now? And how do I put it all together in my own brain? How do I reconnect with the world? What should I be doing? And I think for some people, the reality is that their results come so quickly and they close down, they do sort of a mind shut off after the exam, and they don't worry about it. And that's really good. And hopefully they get good results and they move on and everything's great. But that kind of person is typically not the usual bar taker. Most people are not in that circumstance. And so in my experience, this waiting time is actually pretty painful for almost every bar taker. So if you're watching this video today, my guess is it's probably because you're already thinking about that process, thinking about the what ifs and having those periodic flashbacks maybe to the exam itself. And I want to say that if you're having those kinds of flashbacks, I definitely don't want you to think that I'm making fun of you, because what's happening in a very real sense is that you're having something that we would describe clinically as a post-traumatic stress disorder. You've been through a high-stress, very difficult process, and now you've got to work through it emotionally and mentally. You have to process it. You have to literally move on with your life. And if you don't do that, it can be debilitating. It can destroy your ability to function. But the good news is that it doesn't have to be that way. I've seen many, many people who literally get tied up in knots during this period of time. But I've also seen an awful lot of people figure it out, work it out, and there are some pretty good coping mechanisms that I think are useful. So what I want to do is share with you 5 specific things that you can do while you're waiting for your bar exam results. So let's jump into those. The first of these 5 things, without reference to any political organization, is that you need to move on. And what I mean by that is that you've got to find other interests, other things to replace your bar study time while you're waiting for your results. Now, for many of you, if you came from the world of law, so if you're working in a law firm as an attorney or a paralegal or in some capacity, or you were involved in some form of a legal practice, it's pretty easy. You just go back to work and you've got plenty to do. But many of you who are waiting for bar results in order to begin or advance your legal careers simply don't have that option. And so, as a result, it's really a good time, I think, to start looking aggressively to volunteer and to look for opportunities that you might not have had time for before. It's also a really good way to network, just getting out there and getting some practical experience, finding out who you can help, going to your law school, finding out what's available, what kind of internships and externships might be available, getting yourself in some position to do some work down the road. And one of the things I love is that attorneys have been the first responders in major storms and natural disasters and on a number of political fronts. So getting yourself in a position to do some work down the road as a lawyer, a member of the bar, well, this is the time to get some experience that way. And of course, it's a great time to interview if that's going to be part of your process. Now, the reason that I suggest volunteer work right now is that because if you're not a licensed attorney, there's obviously a limited range of what you're going to be able to do. But the point is that you want to reconnect with the reason that you went through this entire trauma of law school and the bar exam in the first place. In other words, I think you need to get back to what makes you feel valuable and useful and good when you're doing legal work in the first place. I had a potential student contact me the other day who said, I really don't like lawyers and I really don't want to be a lawyer. And I said, well, then why are you taking the bar exam? And with that, they kind of went silent, and I think actually they decided not to take it. If you don't have that motivation, what are you doing here? But most people do have that motivation, and this waiting period is a great time to be doing some work in that regard. If you're really stuck about what to do or where you can help out, contact your local bar association or maybe the political or community or nonprofit groups that you align with to find out where volunteer opportunities might exist. People like the legal aid offices, churches, nonprofits, other community groups really need lawyers and need people involved with the law as paralegals, as those who can help out, as clerks and interns. And so it's a great opportunity to get involved. And of course, if you've got a political interest, and who doesn't these days, then, I can tell you that candidates and campaigns are always looking for volunteers and helpers, and that's another terrific way to network. There are a lot of people with legal connections involved in politics. It's a great way to find out what's going on in the world and in your community. And I can tell you from my experience working on presidential campaigns at the highest level, down to school board elections at really the lowest level, I guess, candidates are always looking for volunteers, and they're always looking for helpers. And you might choose to help out a couple hours a week. Maybe it's going to be more than that depending on the year and the activity. But the point is that you want to move on with your life, and in order to do that, you have to find some things to be doing, and volunteer work is a great way to do that. All right. Item number 2, for those who've just come back from vacation, they'll recognize this one immediately. But number 2 is really important. You got to hug it out. What do I mean by that? Well, if you've got a family, and most of you do, those of you that don't have family hopefully have some friends, and hopefully you've still got some friends left. If you've got a job, or even better, you've got a family, friends, and a job, all three, this is a really good time to reconnect with any and all of those people. Remember back when you were studying for the bar, there were all of those missed date nights and the hangout times and the work assignments that maybe you didn't get to because you just had to study. Well, you might have forgotten a lot about that, but believe me, the people around you, they remember all those missed moments. And this waiting period is a great time to make up for some of that by being extra attentive. And what I'm saying here is that I think you want to spend some additional time with friends and family, coworkers. I schedule a lot of coffees at this time of the year just to catch up with old friends and kind of see what's going on. I like to take vacation time, and because I'm so close to Disney World, that's easy to do. And I actually get the benefit of seeing students and other people I know who are coming to Disney World. So it's a great time to do these sorts of things, but you don't have to go to Disney. It's just the point of reconnecting. I would say that even for me as a teacher, I need that time back into the mainstream, into the real world. And I would encourage you to do that as well. Now, I recognize the reality is that you're probably pretty tired from studying for the...
Thanks for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.